Hi, welcome to Things Podcast, where you get kids' views on world news. Sorry for the wait. We've been on a hiatus, a bit of a procrastination session, you may call it. Now, a few things may have changed. We're going to try a new structure with each person in charge of one subject, like sports news, main headlines, funny news. And also, our editor, Dylan, has left Things Podcast. He says he may come once a month, but for now, Y has replaced him as editor. Moving on from the intro, our first story of today, the main headline, is the Australian COVID case in Wellington.
So, an Australian going on holiday to New Zealand tested positive for COVID-19, and he visited a lot of places in the CBD, including like Lido and Te Papa, a lot of places near us, and we are going into level 2 tomorrow because of one guy.
Personally, I just feel like this is a large stroke of bad luck because of all the isolating and testing that we do. There had to be such a small chance of someone getting through with COVID, but we just got really unlucky, and that person, in the few days they were here, managed to go to lots of places that are highly populated in the CBD, and it could potentially be much worse now. Though no fault goes to the Australian, they, to what I believe, followed all precautions, and it was just unlucky.
While it most likely was luck, or the lack of luck, that caused this, there was greater precautions that could have been taken. I personally believe that we should not have open borders to any nation unless they have had 0 COVID cases community transmitted for at least a couple weeks. If we get infected again, then we will be in lockdown for a while. And being in lockdown is going to hurt the economy much more than having a few tourists come here over a month period before we get infected again.
Of course, there is the middle ground of having more and more rigorous testing procedures. Now, you already had that, and it failed, though it is possible we could attempt to learn from our mistakes and try this again with even more testing and isolating requirements before people are allowed to freely roam as tourists. This can strike a good middle ground because, as Connery said, lots of small businesses are suffering from lockdowns when we have them. However, then there are also places like Queenstown, which still suffer greatly due to lack of tourists because they are mainly tourist towns. And being able to get a balance between having places like Queenstown active and thriving and being able to have more business and community places, but having both of them thriving would be the ideal situation. So it's just hard, us trying to find the middle ground between that, where we have enough testing procedures to ensure that we can safely say that none of the tourists will have COVID. Now, after all that COVID news, I'd say it's time for a nice relief, but unfortunately no, because we have Connery here to talk about China, and most likely COVID-related China stories.
Okay, so China is pretty controversial. It's just, yeah. What the Chinese government has been doing in so many ways, in so many different things, is absolutely appalling. But the biggest one to affect the majority of the people in the world, most likely, is the fact that we now know that there was a good chance that the coronavirus, COVID-19, was created in a Chinese testing lab. This is still a theory. However, there is some really good evidence to back it up. About 2 weeks ago, the Biden administration, you can look back, see a bunch of news articles about this, was going crazy about looking into the Wuhan lab and what was going on in there. It seemed like then that there was no precedent to this. They just really wanted to look into it. But recently it came out that a Chinese defector had came to the US and had some knowledge about the Wuhan lab. It was also found out that this Chinese defector actually came to the US before the Biden administration started going crazy about the Wuhan lab. So it was most likely that this defector came, told them what they know about the lab. Most likely, it seems that COVID could have been made there. And then the Biden administration wanted to see it because they thought that they could get evidence that the Chinese had actually made the virus.
Personally, even with all this evidence, I do just, for some reason, find it hard to believe this actually did happen. It's just a lot of time without hard evidence, things that aren't easily believable at face value, unless they're confirmed, can still be hard to confirm at face value, like this. Now, the evidence does say that there is a good chance, but that doesn't mean there is no chance that it didn't happen. Personally, I believe that the chance isn't maybe a great chance. I do believe that there's a chance that it happened, but the fact that a lab produced a virus that has killed several million people, I do find a little hard to believe, especially because if it's confirmed as true, then the world could be in complete shambles with lots of people extremely angry at China.
Yes, there is no hard evidence to support this. It has not been confirmed at all yet. But we do know that with our current level of technology, we could easily make a virus that could do damage like this. And if you are somebody in the Chinese government who does not care about human life or the economic impact, making and releasing this virus would be hugely beneficial to you. If you are somebody who's bought into Chinese propaganda and thought of the US as an enemy, and you are also somewhat smart, you would you would realize that this virus, because of how stupid Americans are, would most likely destroy the US population and destroy their country for the next couple of years.
The problem with this isn't the evidence or the way it could be true. The thing I believe is the main problem about why this doesn't work in my head is just that for this to be released, some form of government authority would have had to know. This would mean that not only would they have had to release this virus, but the entire Chinese government would have had to keep it under wraps, even though it could have killed, it has killed so many of their people and so many other people. And they also would have known that if this ever got out, like it almost has been, if it is true, that there would be massive backlash from almost every opposing country who has suffered losses, both economical and the physical health of their civilians or citizens, and every country would have had to hate China. And this is why it doesn't make sense in my head. The fact that China just held back all this, knowing that the consequences would.
So, for the two main points you made there, number one, it could have gotten out on accident. But number two, you were saying, what was it? Why would China not own up to it? What country wants to be responsible for a global pandemic?
One, they are already mostly held responsible, though not at the fault of the government, at the fault of one of its citizens. But still, if it got out on accident, that could make this even worse, because they got it out on accident, and then they decided just not to tell anyone about it. Now, I know they don't want to be the country responsible, but would you rather have your country claim responsibility to something and have it become a minor issue, or maybe major if lots of people are dumb, like they are? Though those conspiracy theorists might also believe that if the Chinese admit it, then it's true because their logic. But it's China just because it was the one who originated. That doesn't mean whether it was accidental or not. That doesn't mean they still suffered major losses from deaths and economic downfalls. And it would have been less if they had told people about this and warned them, because then other countries wouldn't have got it and continued spreading it. And that could have circled back to China and infected them more. Even after the lockdown, people could have illegally immigrated and spread it. And people coming home could have had it. And if they just... There's not many reasons about why they should have withheld the information if they did this accidentally.
While that does make a lot of sense to us, that most likely would not be how the Chinese government would have thought of it. The Chinese government does not have any allies. They're allied, technically, with North Korea, but what is North Korea gonna do in the virus situation? They don't have much leverage. Surrounding them, they got India, one of their biggest enemies. Japan, who is basically a part of NATO at this point. Down south, we've got Australia and New Zealand. And although the Russians definitely aren't on the side of the US, they're not just gonna help out China because China doesn't like the US. Saying that they've got a virus infecting them, or that they had created a virus and it had accidentally gotten out, would have made them look weak on the world stage, and they can't have that happen.
And also, Ben, every time you say something making COVID sound worse, it makes it, in my opinion, all the more reason the Chinese government would say it's not us.
Now, I understand what you said about, how me saying that it kills many people, and that would make them not want to look like it was purposeful. But the problem is, leaks happen all the time, unless you're extremely paranoid, and I mean extremely paranoid about information moving. If that doesn't happen, especially if something's morally wrong and you have lots of employees, someone's going to leak that information. And that person, that China should have thought this was happening, and they would have realized that a leak probably would have happened, and it would have made them look worse. And I do understand Connery's point about how it wouldn't have made them look weak, and I don't know what China's standings are. I know that a lot of the things they do, like things in Hong Kong, aren't morally right. But They're extremely morally wrong because Connery scoffed at me. And it's not only there, they do it many places. But the thing is, would you forsake the lives of lots of your citizens and lives of people all around the world just to not look weak?
China probably would. Okay, we have a lot of evidence for this.
No, that is bullshit. That is bullshit.
From the seat of a dictator, which the president of China basically is, the lives of a couple million citizens or million people over the world don't really seem to matter. We have a lot of evidence for this. When Mao first took control in China, he decided that achieving communism was what they wanted to do. So they would achieve that by having a famine that killed 24 million people. They did that on purpose. He didn't care about the lives of these people. He just wanted to achieve his goals.
It's kind of hard to achieve your goals when half the world is at war with you.
But they wouldn't go to war with you. Think about it. If you go to war with China, who's going to make your products?
Not to mention an extremely large population and henceforth an extremely large army, most likely. Now, I do mostly agree with you on this, that they are heartless, but at this point, granted everything you said is true, which I do believe is, it's just, you can kill your own people and other countries won't be like, hey, this dude's bad, let's go to war with them. You can purposely let out a virus and have that kill millions of people worldwide, and people would go, you're not a very nice country, we're going to stop trading with you at the bare minimum.
But they can't do that. If they stop trading with China, where do they get Chinese products? China makes up the majority of products on the market right now. And in countries like Australia and New Zealand, the majority of their trade network is China. Not to mention that China also owns, through loans, buyouts, other stuff like that, around 10% of all ports in Europe and a good portion of ports in Africa and Asia, meaning that if they want to use their vital trade ports, they can't make enemies of China.
That is true, and I did forget about that. But still, it's not like countries would just be like, oh yeah, you released a virus and it killed maybe a couple 100,000, maybe a couple million, a lot of people. But you're a pretty important country, so it's just all skeletons in the closet now. That is not what would have happened. They may not cease trading or something like that, but there wouldn't be no major consequences for China. There would still be consequences if they did release this and it got out. Like, that could be just a complete lack of trust, potential, like, conspiracy theorists or just people in general stopping, like, buying products from Chinese sites like Alibaba. And, like, it doesn't matter whether they own ports or not. That doesn't mean they're not going to suffer consequences from releasing a virus if they did. And there's also still the chance that it's all just an accident that it got out. A person really did eat a bat and start spreading the virus.
Yes, there is a good chance that it that China did not do this on purpose. I mean, there is a very good chance, but that doesn't mean, well, if they did do this on purpose, or if they did create this virus, which there is a lot of evidence for, then they had to have a reason for it. And we cannot find an accurate reason for it. We can only speculate. But China could have many reasons, and weakening other people's power on the world stage would be probably the number one reason for it.
Anyway, I'd love to continue arguing with you, Connery, but time is running short, so I feel like it's time to wrap this up. Sorry about the missed conclusion, but after all, this has been Things Podcast, where you get kids' views on world news. Moving on to our next story, presented by Caden.
Hello, I am from the Funny News Department, and today I'll be telling you about fun news, not shit news. Anyways, today I'll be talking about Muja, an alligator Muga, that has just turned 85 at the Belgrade Zoo in Serbia, who survived the World War II bombings in 1941 and 1944 and the NATO bombings of 1999. This alligator had to have its foot amputated for some disease that I forgot the name of. Thank you, bye-bye. Honk honk.
Thank you, Caden. Moving on to our next story, presented by Y. Welcome to Music News.
It is me from the music place. So Tyler the Creator is releasing a new album in 2 days, and it is going to be called Call Me If You Get Lost. It has been teased for years now, and if you call the number 1-855-444-8888, then you will get a teaser of one of the songs. It's randomized, so you might be the first to hear one of the new songs. That's all I wanted to say. Back over to Ben.